Behind one of the tall windows of the Galactic Sciences Institute, the stars illuminated the night. The laboratory was shrouded in deep silence. Amidst the constantly glowing screens and the intense flow of information, there was a void. I remember that moment when everything seemed to stop, the moment I received the news of my father's death. As the sun set, a sense of urgency swept through the Institute's corridors. I immediately ran towards the lab, my heart in my throat, my steps beating a rhythm. When I stepped into the large laboratory, I couldn't see straight. My eyes focused on the trembling hands of my father's former assistant, Dr. Ilara, amidst the crowd. Her expression showed she was in the midst of an emotional storm. "What happened, Ilara?" I asked, my voice shaking. Were we living through the moment when a scientist disappeared? Maybe the only way to find my father was to be in such a complicated situation. Ilara averted her eyes, taking a deep breath. "I should go back," she said. "I shouldn't have found you here. Come on, let's go outside." The security personnel at the Institute made way for us. We moved along the corridor, our steps breaking the silence. I was deep in thought, trying to understand whether everything that happened in my father's lab was just an accident or something else. At one point, we reached the large conference room in the Institute. The room was filled with graphs and scientific data displayed on a wide screen. The faces there bore worry and sorrow. My father's colleagues sat with deep sadness etched on their faces. Professor Maris, an old colleague of my father's, began to speak. "I'm sorry, but this news is truly heartbreaking. Dr. Cross's death. This is a great loss for both the scientific community and all of us personally." When I heard my father's name, the atmosphere in the room darkened. Ilara turned her eyes to me again. "My father. How did it happen?" I asked, the words struggling to escape my mouth. The expression on my face was trying to decipher my own emotions. Professor Maris took a deep breath and bowed his head. "There is no direct cause of your father's death," he said. "He just lost his life in an accident inside the lab. Perhaps one of the experiments he was working on inadvertently became dangerous." The sounds coming from the laboratory indicated that a crowd was gathering outside. The news of my father's death had left a deep mark on everyone at the Institute. At that moment, I was trying to understand the depth of my father's life and work. My eyes drifted to the notes on the table where my father's old projects lay. Everything was beyond a momentary tragedy. Ilara wiped away her tears and said, "After all, it wasn't just us who knew him. The entire galaxy did. And we will keep his memory alive." The pain and determination on her face reflected the deep emotions brought on by this loss. After my father's death, somehow, everything at the Institute returned to its usual order. But there was an emptiness, a void etched into my heart. The works my father left behind deepened his absence even more. That night, under the stars, I decided to honor my father's memory and to delve into his legacy. That moment marked the beginning of a journey to confront both myself and my father's legacy. My father's death left behind secret reports discussing his scientific research. Everyone was scrambling to understand the contents of these reports. However, I wasn't the only one unaware of how deep this research went. My sister, Serin, had found something unsettling about our father's death. The unease within me wasn't just about losing my father, but also about Serin. Her sudden disappearance had made everything more complicated. The days following my father's death passed in a kind of gloomy silence. Every corner of the house was filled with a senseless void. My sister Serin did not appear in the kitchen one morning for breakfast. This was out of character for her. When I returned home in the evening, everything was in its place, but I realized Serin was missing. I searched every room in the house, moving every object, looking for a clue. My hurried searches only increased my anxiety. When I entered Serin's room, I found a note in the shadow by the window. The note was handwritten and contained some annotations that I didn't understand. A chilling feeling overcame me. When I heard my father's name, the atmosphere in the room darkened. Ilara turned her eyes to me again. "My father! How did it happen?" I asked, the words struggling to escape my mouth. The expression on my face was trying to decipher my own emotions. Professor Maris took a deep breath and bowed his head. "There is no direct cause of your father's death," he said. "He just lost his life in an accident inside the lab. Perhaps one of the experiments he was working on inadvertently became dangerous." The sounds coming from the laboratory indicated that a crowd was gathering outside. The news of my father's death had left a deep mark on everyone at the institute. At that moment, I was trying to understand the depth of my father's life and work. My eyes drifted to the notes on the table where my father's old projects lay. Everything was beyond a momentary tragedy. Ilara wiped away her tears and said, "After all, it wasn't just us who knew him. The entire galaxy did. And we will keep his memory alive." The pain and determination on her face reflected the deep emotions brought on by this loss. After my father's death, somehow, everything at the institute returned to its usual order. But there was an emptiness, a void etched into my heart. The works my father left behind deepened his absence even more. That night, under the stars, I decided to honor my father's memory and to delve into his legacy. That moment marked the beginning of a journey to confront both myself and my father's legacy. My father's death left behind secret reports discussing his scientific research. Everyone was scrambling to understand the contents of these reports. However, I wasn't the only one unaware of how deep this research went. My sister, Serin, had found something unsettling about our father's death. The unease within me wasn't just about losing my father, but also about Serin. Her sudden disappearance had made everything more complicated. The days following my father's death passed in a kind of gloomy silence. Every corner of the house was filled with a senseless void. My sister Serin did not appear in the kitchen one morning for breakfast. This was out of character for her. When I returned home in the evening, everything was in its place, but I realized Serin was missing. I searched every room in the house, moving every object, looking for a clue. My hurried searches only increased my anxiety. When I entered Serin's room, I found a note in the shadow by the window. The note was handwritten and contained some annotations that I didn't understand. A chilling feeling overcame me. As evening darkness settled, a sense of waiting prevailed in the house. All the lights were on, and phones and computers were constantly in use. Everything seemed to be at a standstill. Each step echoing through the corridors of the house only deepened the sense of loss. One night, together with Ilara and a few detectives, we searched every corner of the house again. Ilara was examining a bookshelf in Serin's room. Serin seems to have been researching something important here. "Maybe she found something related to your father's death," she said. Ilara's words sent me into deep thoughts. Had Serin been trying to reach something after our father's death? At that moment, with a heartache and intense worry, I thought there was a connection behind Serin's disappearance. Late that night, while sitting at the police station, one of the detectives approached me. "From what we can see, we found some traces of the direction Serin went. However, it's hard to determine exactly where they lead." "What does that mean?" I said, my voice trembling. "What should we do to find Serin?" The detective laid out papers in front of me, with various notes and maps on them. The things Serin was researching are quite complex. The notes she found related to her father's death include some confidential documents. These documents contain information about parallel universes. This suggests that Serin might have been trying to solve something. That night, I returned home exhausted but not without hope. The silence in the house felt like it had settled over everything. While trying to understand the reason behind Serin's disappearance, I scoured every corner, keeping an eye out for any clue. But I found nothing. I continued to wait in hope, searching every day for the last traces Serin left me in her room. As my eyes scanned different corners every day, a growing sense of despair enveloped me. With each passing day, the hopes of finding Serin diminished, but I felt there was a mystery behind my father's death and Serin's disappearance. A few weeks later, thanks to the notes Ilara found, I discovered more clues about my father's research. Now, I had to take further steps to understand why Serin disappeared and what she was searching for after our father's death. From that day on, our home was filled with loneliness and silence. Serin's disappearance had shaken me deeply. I felt as though I had lost not just a sister but my closest friend. The clues Serin found pointed to an unknown technology that my father had been experimenting with. This meant that my father had gone somewhere, and Serin was trying to find out where. During the period when Serin was missing, I found myself on a journey to the dark corners of the galaxy. After my father's death, I began meeting with his former colleagues to understand what had happened. Under the stars, while tracing the clues of his research, I found myself having to enter the high-security area of the Institute's laboratory. Dr. Kale was an old colleague of my father's, and talking to him carried a great hope of filling the void within me. When I opened the door to the lab, the scene before me was like something out of a science fiction movie. Massive screens were scattered around the laboratory, and the lights flickered in bright blue and green hues. Sitting in deep thought in front of the screen, Dr. Kale was examining old scientific journals covered in a thin layer of dust. He took a deep breath and, looking over his glasses, said, "Luca, welcome. I'm sorry I have to meet you in such circumstances." His words felt like a key that would help me understand the depth of the research. "Dr. Kale, I've gathered more information about my father's death and Serin's disappearance. But I need to know what's really behind these events." After a moment of deep silence, Dr. Kale turned on the screen next to him. A series of complex data and graphs began to appear. "This data shows that your father's research is not only scientific but also quite important to some entities in other regions of the galaxy," he said. "An alien race is after your father's parallel universe technology. They want to use this technology for their own benefit." From a small holographic projection device, sketches of the aliens' appearance were displayed. The aliens were characterized by their tall and thin bodies, dark eyes, and thin energy fields surrounding them. These entities possess very advanced technology. Your father's research on parallel universes caught their interest. Now, they are willing to do anything to seize this technology. As Dr. Kale's finger traced over the graphs on the screen, he continued speaking. "These aliens began gathering information about your father's recent work. According to our information, these entities staged your father's death to look like an accident. In reality, his research in the days leading up to his death was very close to their plans." A heavy silence filled the laboratory. Dr. Kale's explanations revealed that everything was part of a much more complex structure. "So, Serin's disappearance and my father's death are part of these aliens' plan?" I asked, my voice trembling. Dr. Kale nodded. "Yes, the mysteries of your father's research were being tracked by these aliens. They aim to use the parallel universe technology for their purposes. That's why there might be a connection between your father's death and Serin's disappearance." For a moment, the lights in the lab dimmed, and the holographic projections started to glow in a dim environment. At that moment, I felt like I was in the middle of a sci-fi movie. The lights revolving around Dr. Cale tried to illuminate the mysteries shrouded in darkness surrounding my father's death. Taking notes carefully from the screen, Dr. Cale said, "The first thing we need to do is understand what kind of threat these aliens pose and how they are trying to seize your father's research. The clues Serin found might shed light on this matter. But unfortunately, those involved are much more complex and dangerous." At that moment, a determination arose within me. I had to be willing to do whatever it took to understand the true purpose of the aliens pursuing my father and Serin, to stop them, and to solve the mystery behind everything. The echoing sounds in the dark corners of the lab showed me how difficult this journey would be. But one thing was certain. My father and Serin's lives were waiting for the truths hidden in this darkness to be brought to light. Starting the operation to rescue Serin weighed heavily on my heart. Infiltrating the alien base was a mission filled with risks and dangers. As I left the lab and set off for the designated base, I knew everything was at a critical stage. Ilara, my teammate who would help me, was by my side, and we would see together how challenging this task would be. Gliding among the stars, we advanced toward our target, the alien base. From the window of our spaceship, we saw a brightly lit structure in the distance. The alien base was a massive structure carved into a large asteroid. It looked like a giant metal mass, technologically very advanced. When we landed inside the base, Ilara and I reviewed our plans one last time. "This is definitely a high-security area," said Ilara, pointing to the transit points on the screens. "What you see now is one of the most sensitive areas of the base. The security systems are always active and can detect even the slightest movement." "So, what should we do?" I asked, my eyes focused on the giant structure outside. "What kind of entry will we make to find where Serin is located?" Ilara carefully examined the maps. "We need to use secret passages. To infiltrate the inner part of the base, we have to get past the outer security lines. Right now, we'll try to find a hidden entrance they can't see. Then, we'll use our signal receivers to locate the area where Serin is." We made a silent landing as we exited the spaceship. We touched the ground softly and carefully surveyed our surroundings. My eyes followed the security lights glowing in the darkness. The outer part of the base's security systems was protected by a highly advanced network. We had to stay alert at all times. Ilara paused for a moment, connected to a computer screen, and began to decode the security codes. The rapidly scrolling codes on the screen showed how difficult a task awaited us. "It's going to be tough to get through these codes," she said, her fingers moving quickly on the screen. "But if I can crack them, we can access a hidden passage." After a while, with Ilara cracking the codes, a secret door opened for us to enter the base. The door led to a dark corridor. "Come on, we need to be careful," Ilara said as she opened the door. "This corridor will provide direct access to the inner part of the base. The security systems will be more intense here." The atmosphere inside the corridor was filled with an almost suffocating silence. Every step we took created a metallic echo, increasing the anxiety within me. As we moved along the corridor, Ilara checked our signal receiver, searching for Serin's signal. Within a few minutes, Ilara's face lit up. "Serin's signal is in this direction. She must be somewhere in the deeper regions of the base." When we reached the end of the corridor, we were met with a large door. The door was heavily guarded with security cameras and scanners. A series of glowing lights and sensors were located at the top of the door. Ilara carefully decoded the security systems and managed to open the door. As the door opened, a massive control center appeared before us. This high-tech, expansive area was filled with various screens and data streams. The screens displayed various projects the aliens were working on and documents containing information about my father's research. In one corner, I saw Serin bound. Her eyes were closed, and she wasn't moving. My inner sorrow transformed into deep determination. "We found Serin," I said, turning to Ilara. "We need to rescue her immediately." Ilara managed to discreetly disable the nearby security cameras. I quickly went to Serin and untied her restraints. We had to cover Serin and carefully make our way out of the base. We moved swiftly, paying close attention to the security systems on our way back, and finally took refuge in our spaceship. As the doors of the spaceship closed, I felt a great sense of relief. Although Serin was still asleep, having her by my side gave me immense hope. "We did it," I said, looking at Ilara. "Now, we need to uncover my father's research and the aliens' true plans." As I gazed at the stars shining in the distance, I felt a renewed determination within me. We would continue to fight to eliminate the alien threat and protect my father's legacy. I managed to find Serin, but this rescue operation was just the beginning. Learning that my father was in a parallel universe presented a new field of struggle. Serin's notes indicated that my father was trapped somewhere in that parallel universe and had been stuck there ever since. Now, with Serin's help, I needed to devise a plan to find my father and rescue him from this parallel realm. I decided to delve into the depths of the parallel universe and understand this mysterious world. My father's research was the starting point of everything, and now I had to risk everything to complete this research and reunite my family. This challenging journey would test me both physically and mentally, but I had one goal: to bring my family back together. I hope you had a good time. If you liked my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye. See you in the next story.